Welcome to the latest episode of Templar Talks Beyond Universes. As we mentioned on our last episode, we had so much fun with the team episodes. We're going to kind of make it a regular occurrence. I'm obviously joined by my co-host Todd Doe. Hello, Todd.
Hello. Oh yeah, it's audio, isn't it?
Yeah. Todd's doing well as per usual, and we're joined today by Ed from Team Templar. Hello,
I'm the only survivor. Everyone else
has gone. Yeah, they've all been kicked off the team. But no, effectively, what we're going to do every month is one member of the team is going to kind of come up with some spice for us to go over, and then those of us that are around, we're going to get together and record it. And actually, I have some somewhat exciting news, more so for the team than the audience, so I don't know why I'm choosing now to do it, but our producer James has actually agreed to do every episode going forward as long as we do it on Fridays. So yeah, we're actually going to have a sound engineer, which is pretty fun, considering he doesn't play or like Magic. But to jump into it, kick things off, Ed, what are we talking about today?
That's a good question. Let's start with assuming Underworld Breach hits the Banhammer. I don't want to...
Specifically Underworld Breach, not the deck.
Underworld Breach, specifically that card, and nothing else gets touched, because I think that's probably the most likely outcome, and I don't want to talk about bans particularly, because that's kind of boring. But where do you see Modern going after that? What cards are you excited to play? What decks are you excited to play? And just what would your thoughts on how the meta then moves again? Given we've got the RCQ season now coming up, which will be Modern, so
yeah, I think it's honestly now, like, obviously we briefly spoke about this before hitting the record button, but I think it's more difficult to predict than it usually would be, because when the Ring got banned, we obviously gained Opal, and was it the same ban?
Yeah.
Was it?
I'm pretty sure they banned the Ring and unbanned Twin and Opal at the same time, right?
I'm second guessing myself now, but it was close, right? Like there wasn't that long between those two events. That feels like a weird time, but it feels like what was the meta obviously got eroded because the Ring got banned, and then what's become the meta is irrelevant because we think what's happened with the unbanning is going to go away as well. So I think it's a difficult spot to actually predict what's going to do well. Obviously, it's my bias, but I think initially Murktide decks will do well, because I think in an unknown meta they tend to thrive because it's a reactive deck. But more long term, I don't know. Is Energy just going to become the main? Oh no, Amped Raptor, the Ring got banned and they unbanned Opal Breach. Okay, sure. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Energy's going to run.
I'm off Energy. I've been playing Energy loads, and it's not in the same place. And that's not. I don't think that's to do with Breach necessarily.
I mean, I think Energy's always going to be there, though, right? It's the new burn.
Yeah, but it's not going to be like up there as the best deck after Breach goes. I think there's other more powerful things to be doing, right? Amulet doing amulet things. Frog decks are frog decks, right? That's the new Murktide.
I think if once we get beyond Breach, I think Energy is actually in a really tough spot, because it will lose heavily to Black-White and Eldrazi, and then obviously the combo decks have always been its weakness anyway.
Eldrazi is like... Yeah, it's a really odd spot in general, because like you de facto say Amulet becomes tier 0 again. Like, I mean, it's always been pretty up there, but because...
Well, it doesn't if
but yeah,
Dimir becomes popular, right?
This is what I mean. So if Dimir becomes popular because it's a good option to play, then Amulet gets hit. But then if Dimir's popular, Black-White fucks Dimir, but Black-White also fucks Amulet and Tron.
So have we got a good meta?
So is Black-White going to just be... Yeah, but is Black-White too good? Like, what beats Black-White post-Breach?
I mean, I think Black-White is the middling deck, right? So I think that doesn't necessarily have any matchups it eats. Maybe Dimir, potentially. and then I think it's probably favoured against energy. But I think every matchup's pretty close. I don't think it's running away with anything.
It's your mid-range deck, and it's the new Jund.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic saying, but
is it not good against Amulet?
I think it's pretty close. It has good cards for Amulet, but at the same time, Amulet is Amulet. It has a lot of angles of attack. Can a fairish deck keep up with all of those?
I wonder if it'll play Spellbomb main still as well. Nihil Spellbomb. If Breach goes. Like if Black-White...
Do you mean Relic?
Yeah, you mean Relic Regenerate.
Relic, sorry.
Yeah.
Relic or Vial was the... Yeah, it went
No
from
one was
to
playing
Relic.
Vial towards...
No.
It won the Australian RC.
Oh, what, with Vial?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think there's still a bit of a debate on which, like, because there's still some decks not playing Ketramos, and I think that was one of them, but then it had the Vials. And,
okay.
I think White Orchid main, so...
Yeah, I have to admit, I have been a little less interested and keeping on top of Modern recently purely because Breach was just...
Yeah, I mean...
Like, it just felt kind of pointless, right? Like, did Breach... Did it win Spotlight in the end?
No, it's Black-White won that.
Black-White won against Breach, right?
The final was Black-White Breach, yeah.
So,
I mean, it was functionally solved, right? And there wasn't much for us to be engaging with because it's not Modern season, right? Still standard season. But Eldrazi picks up new toys, right, in the new Ugin.
Actually, the post Breach world with the new set. I know you said we're not going to talk about bans, but I think that card, the new Ugin, is probably
I think
like that's pushed. Like that's really pushed.
I think it would go into the Eldrazi deck as it is. But I think if there is a world where it does get banned, it's a completely different version of the deck that is completely colourless, maybe splashing green somewhere. But, it would probably make the use of Opal and those kinds of cards. And probably initially you probably want the Tron lands back in the deck just to make that magic number of 7 on turn 3.
Do you think they saw Khan, sinking back into the ether, and they were like, no. Tron still must be relevant.
See, that's why my little tinfoil hat is that I think they're looking at Ponder, but in do we unban this to give
Ponder's
Blue a
fine, right?
I mean, I think it probably would be, but I know a lot of people think it would be fucking mental to unban. Just because of the library manipulation.
I think that's probably one of the more likely ones.
I think it's just, if anything, it's just time consuming, right? They just want to... the reason it would be frustrating is because of the amount of time it takes for people to mull over the free cards.
Yeah.
And then decide to shuffle in 5 minutes anyway.
To be fair, I mean, I've got to take 20 game actions on my turn, so, I need every minute I can get.
Yeah. I do find that I know it's not the topic, but I do find it's interesting that slow play doesn't seem to be as punished in Magic with stuff like that, which maybe causes the problem with those kind of cards like the Spinning Top. Oh, obviously, Spinning Top, KCI, Amulet as well. All these are going to take, like Nardu, they're going to take lots of time to resolve game actions. But I do feel there are a lot of Magic games where people do slow play fairly heavily, and it doesn't seem to be as reinforced as I would have thought it might be.
I think it's just so objective for a judge to really make a past comment on it, right? It needs to be, there needs to be a reason to slow play, which means it needs to be close to the end of the round for anyone to be like, okay, you're purposefully delaying the game now, and you're not just thinking about the myriad of turns ahead where whatever your decision you're making might be relevant, right?
Yeah.
And these Terminus style decks where it's you if you miss one card, you lose the game, right? If you make one mistake, like against Amulet or Breach or any Storm, if you make one mistake, your whole game is over. Then I'm taking 5 minutes to make that decision.
It's also if you're only taking 2 game actions on a turn, why not take 2 minutes on both of those decisions? Because more often than not, the decks that want to take many actions a turn, at least when they start doing that, they probably go quite quickly for more often than not, and they know the sequencing they're going to go. admittedly, there are occasions where it becomes a bit more complicated, but you typically know the route, and it becomes quite quick and trivial.
I think I've just got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about general rules enforcement and judging in Magic at the moment. Like, it feels like I know we joke about it, but like every weekend there's just another fucking controversy, and like some of the stuff that is happening is just so egregious. You're kind of like I don't know. Did you see the guy that was like putting cards in his lap?
Yeah, from the NRG top 8. Yeah.
I think he. I don't know if it was definitively decided, but it felt like he had his sideboard cards in his lap, and when he got duff cards, he was putting them in his lap, and then they were becoming something else, right?
The full context,
Fucking
right?
hell.
The full context to that is he made the top 8, and it turns out he got DQ'd in the semi-final because he was cheating, because he had extra, or he'd swapped out cards from his main deck already. So his actual deck list only had 1 planes in it.
Yeah, his opponent conceded, right?
And he was caught on stream having 2 planes in play. And then I think a couple of rounds prior to that, like round 6 or something, he had like a Restless Buviak or something in play that wasn't even in his deck list. And then you watch the stream back, you can then see his cards on his lap. And him shuffling cards.
Yeah, because he had like a Battlefield Forge or something in hand,
and he swapped out for an Erebus,
and then suddenly like Erebus's Forge was in his hand.
Yeah,
and like from what I heard, his semi-final opponent lost game 1, checked deck lists or something like, because it was open deck list or whatever. Checked deck list, saw that there was 1 planes and was like, he played 2 planes in the first game, so he just scooped and said I concede, and then the judges DQ'd
but initially,
obviously, but like
initially I think there was like, oh, deck list error, we've got to DQ you, but kind of feels bad. But then you watch some of the stream footage back, and he's literally got cards on his lap that he's shuffling into his hand and stuff. Yeah,
it feels like
wild.
it feels like it's so prevalent. Like, I think that's my worry with it all, is it is all just like, But anyway, that's a topic for another day.
It becomes prevalent because it gets pointed out, though, right? So, yes, there's always a story, and it seems like there is a different one every weekend, but it's because it always gets caught and pointed out. I guess that's maybe the optimist in me that says it's just those guys that get caught.
I know I said it's a subject for another day, but there was that Donny, the Amulet Titan player, right, that Fire Shoes went after. Who?
No, it wasn't the Titan player. It was the guy playing against Titan.
No, he was on Titan. He was on Titan as well.
Was he on Titan?
They were both on Titan, and obviously like 30 people came out of the woodwork, being like, I've already reported this guy like 20 times and nothing's happened, and you do just kind of think that's why I'd say about the slow play thing of like it not being reinforced, but it feels like people tell these stories and have these interactions, but nothing ever happens because of it. And I won't name it, but, I guess if they listen to this, they know who they fucking are. But I remember you played against a player at an Axion event who kept looking at your deck while you were shuffling. They were shuffling before game 1. They kept a no-land hand on like a Malta 5 or something. You played like 3 lands and 1 creature, and they sideboarded the perfect sideboard plan into your deck, and you were like, "Oh, that's fucking convenient." You've done, and it's obvious
they
you can
conceded before, playing anything, and then sideboarded exactly against my deck, and I hadn't played anything. Yeah, but again, that's plausible deniability.
But then that same player played against Rocco in the win and in round in Prague. Hence why I'm saying you know who you are. And Rocco, a judge came over and asked Rocco if he was missing a card or like how many cards were in your deck. And because he dropped a Marsh Flats, because he went to time, gathered all this shit up and had dropped a Marsh Flats on the way, and the judge like picked it up and was like, "Is this your card?" And as soon as he did that, Rocco's opponent was like, "Judge, deck list error," like he's presented his deck, and the judge was like, "Fuck off," like, which I think is the right attitude in that. But like, that player plays a lot, plays at every UK event, plays at like every European event. They're a really nice person outside of Magic, but like you kind of see those kind of events, and that's just what our group has experienced, right? Like, how many times is that happening in every round? Like with the Amulet Titan guy, people came out of the woodwork saying this guy like gaslighted me every fucking time I've ever played him, and you kind of think, does it just get
I do think communication as well is something that bothers me. Every Magic event I had at London, I had an opponent who just called judge without saying, "Oh, this has just happened. I'm gonna call a judge." They just like screamed and put their hand up, and I was
that always vexes me. As well. I don't understand why you can't have the courtesy.
Yeah.
Of like,
and
I'm not sure what's going on here.
And then I realised what had happened. Like I'd missed a trigger or something, and which happens, you know. Like I play pretty tight most of the time, but I'd miss triggers sometimes. And I said to them, I was like, you know, you can just communicate with me.
Yeah,
like you can tell me before you put your hand up.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's you could just be like, you've missed a trigger. I'm going to call a judge. I'm not going to try and resolve it without a judge.
Yeah.
Like what's the point of that? Right. That's what they're there for, is to mediate these scenarios.
And then the hilarity though is as well at London, I got paired into nobody knows I'm a dog. I think is their handle. I think that's the exact wording. But they had tonsillitis and they couldn't speak. And we had no issues at all because it was like really, like literally, like they like got out a piece of paper being like, "I can't talk. I've lost my voice. I'm sorry." And then it was all hand signals and double checking. But it's like you can communicate very easily, even in difficult circumstances like that. But it does feel that people sometimes just don't.
But I think if you're not a seasoned player, like someone just screaming judge in front of you is going to, like, it's a bit of an intimidation tactic. I think, like, just being like, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to talk through this person. It's like, whatever scenario it is, we can just have a discussion about it, right?
People are always looking to gain an edge though, right?
Well, that's what I mean, and that's where the plausible deniability gets in. Like, if you accidentally slip a look at a card when you're shuffling the deck, and you're pretty handy at that, right? Like,
no, that shouldn't be happening. That's
but
it's gaining an edge, and
you can deny, right? Like, you can deny it, which is why when I shuffle, right, I shuffle over my head, like to the side with my head looking the other way, but I'm looking at my opponent shuffle my deck, and the amount of opponents who just like.
But I mean,
and you're like, what are you doing?
if you're playing against someone that you do have genuine concerns about, you can just call a judge over and be like, "Can you just watch my opponent, please?"
Yeah, but then I think there's the other subject if you feel like a dickhead doing that.
Yeah, but they're the dickhead first if they're actually if they're cheating, right? So,
but that's why I just wish it would all just like.
It's never going to go away. That's the thing you have to realise. It doesn't matter how well supported the judging system is, how harsh the bannings are. Cheating exists. It always, in every game, in every aspect of life, people want to cheat.
Yeah. But I also feel the frustration I have about those small edges where people are cheating just for those like tiny bits of knowledge, like seeing a card in your deck. It because most players aren't like aware of that, or a bit naive in that they get so much more from that, and it's only when you're at the top tables that they kind of stop doing it because they're like, this guy's going to have an eye on me. Like, almost Fabrizio needs to like do a behind the curtain and we can all read the book and we can all know what little tips and tricks these. Well,
things like that is every tournament should just be open deck list. Like, then that issue goes away, right? Those small gains.
Yeah.
So I don't, and there's no reason why that couldn't happen.
I think open deck lists is a different. I agree, and I prefer open deck lists, but I do think the experience is different. And I think some people, I don't agree with. I can't even remember. It was when Arnie was commentating with someone else. I forget who they were commentating with for the Spotlight series, but one of them was talking about how exciting the event is because it's closed deck list, and I was a bit like, stop talking. But at the same time, I can kind of see where it's coming from because it does have that, you know, you get those bullshit decks that are going to get some cheese advantage because, I don't know, like, you know, back to the Merfolk days, you're playing 4 spreading Z's or something like that.
Seismic Assault.
Yeah.
You add more variance, right? And that's.
But I think some people like variance.
But I think closed deck lists.
Go play poker.
Yeah.
Closed deck lists is test of your knowledge of the format. Over your knowledge of the game, right? Whereas open deck lists is your knowledge of the game, right? And how am I going to navigate this particular, like these series of interactions that might happen? So they're different in that sense. And I personally prefer open deck lists because I don't have the time to really invest in the meta game as such. And it's like, I'd rather just be like, I'm making this choice. It has these matchups against these decks.
Yeah.
and now I know my opponent's got one spell pierce or not. Do you know what I mean? I can consider that. Whereas the meta game is like a bigger fish, and it morphs every weekend, and it's harder to get your teeth into, right?
And what's the new hotness in like one specific deck that you might not have?
Yeah.
But back to the actual topic of what the most prevalent deck in Modern's going to be. I guess if I had to land on it in terms of the top tier deck, I would probably actually say black white is probably going to be the best deck.
I don't know. I think there's other decks that are just on the periphery, and there's a lot of pickups recently that have kind of been overlooked because of the breach being the thing, right? Like stock up in Scape Shift. Like I think there's predators for black white, real predators for black white, that are just super consistent, executing their game plan, and they don't care about your disruption because they're just gonna do it. Do you know what I mean? And black white,
I guess Scape Shift is difficult for black white.
Yeah, black white is the deck that's like, I know what you're doing, and I'm going to, nip away at you while stopping you what you're doing. Whereas there's lots of decks that just don't care if you're chipping away, and they're like, it doesn't matter whether I'm on 10 or 5 life, eventually I'm going to do this thing and you're fucked.
A pure control deck as well would eat black white, because black white doesn't have a quick clock. It has very good interaction pieces, but ultimately a blue white control deck that just doesn't care about most of it. You've got like 3 Thought Seizers maybe, and that's all you're really bothered about. It's
I'd love Omnath to come back, but I think blue white is just a better route at the moment.
Oh, bring back Big Teferi. Oh.
Yeah, I mean Big Teferi's in a blue white shell.
Big Teferi in a blue white shell is better than Omnath at the moment. I think the problem with Omnath is just like there's too much cheap removal in the format now.
And you can't glimpse Omnath in. That was when Omnath was good. He came in with 5 other elementals.
There's less reason to play more colours and make your mana base more awkward as well now. Leyline Binding at one stage was the best piece of removal that you could have, whereas now there's so many different cheaper options that you can get at a similar rate. You just don't need to splash on your mana base.
Yeah.
I do fear Magic slowly falling into power creep in a way that it never used to. Cards now, they just do more.
But it's just a natural progression ultimately, because you've got to keep the game progressing, so it's hard not to.
I do think they'll stop eventually. I still have my tinfoil hat that the idea is to make Legacy irrelevant, because it was a mistake for the reserve list. Like all of it was their sin, right? Like to print this stuff that normal players can't use. I think they just want to get to that power level for a format, and then maybe they'll dial it back a bit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's not a mass amount of difference between them now. Like,
no, it's getting closer.
Yeah,
it's getting closer.
I don't know. I also partly think Commander's got a lot, because there's so much going on in Commander, and the excitement is always about the new things going on in Commander. Like Ugin's exactly the kind of thing that a colourless Eldrazi Commander player wants in their deck, right? They want a new Ugin that doesn't do what the old Ugins do and does a bit more or whatever, and it just happens to be in a standard set, right?
But cards like Ugin aren't actually that good in Commander either, right? There's better
they're
things
hard
to
find, yeah. And can you even have it as your commander? You can't, right?
No, you can't have it as your commander.
No, but it's gone.
I'm surprised they didn't do that though. Actually, saying that, make it one of those fucking Planeswalker commander decks where you can have it as your commander.
I think the general consensus is that commander players don't like that.
Oh really?
Did Derevi touch them?
Yeah, probably.
I don't know what commander players like, to be honest.
No, but I think the general consensus was Planeswalkers are bad in the command zone, or they're too good, rather.
Yeah.
So
no, that's
it's not casual enough.
No, that's fair. So I guess the other topic you mentioned about was
I guess why do we keep coming back to Magic? We've actually just talked quite negatively about lots of different things. So what keeps pulling us back? What gets us excited to keep playing?
I mean, that's a hell of a pause, right? That's some dead air for you. But
we all do it, right? So there's got to be reasons.
There does have to be reasons, and I think the only reason for me is probably community and social at this point. And if I'm honest, I think community. So this is like a little bit too probably open for a recorded bit of content, but I think the Norwich community has potentially gotten worse, but I think the local community has gotten better in terms of it feels like a lot, whereas before it was a big Norwich community, not like big, but bigger Norwich community. That's died down a little bit. It's a bit smaller. It's a bit more tight-knit. But it feels like a lot of the Ipswich players are travelling to, the new Bury store, the lower store. Like, it feels like everyone's pulled together and understands the whole nature of, like, support your local game store a little bit more than they used to. But I do think it's difficult to just have community because, it's like when something's community driven, it's hard to keep that going without like significant investment from those members of the community, and like burnout's a thing, right? So I don't know. How about like you, Todd? I mean, I know you kind of come and go from Magic quite a lot in terms of selling. Like, I don't think since I've known you, you've never fully sold out, but you like go bare bones, then kind of reinvest, then bare bones, then reinvest.
I mean, I'm more interested in the national level stuff, right? Like, I'd rather play Magic once a month and play it big for the weekend and get really stuck into that element. I guess my local community it just doesn't have the offering that it had 5 to 6 years ago, where it's like you could have, when it was RCQ season, there wasn't a weekend that didn't have an RCQ, whereas very much now they're few and far between. So, and we've got 2 excellent game stores, Skyward Fire and Langdon, who are still flying the flag of RCQs, but then Athena has like opted out now, which is a real shame because that's a game that was so big for them. And I think
that's the irony, though. I think, I had a bit of a rant about RCQ cost and stuff before we pressed the record button. But like Athena's Magic community is thriving more than it ever did. It's just not the game we play.
Yeah,
it's like
it's
Commander Night is insane at Athena, and it's great, and I'm glad to see them do well off it. But it is also, I think that's the thing though with communities, like it's almost like the old boys club or whatever at a pub, right? Like, if you actually want the business to sustain and thrive, you have to have new blood coming in. And and to be fair, I felt really bad, and I think it was the worst Friday for a new player to come, because when a new player comes to Athena, usually I would say, people like Will engage heavily in them, with them. And I'll try on as well. And we had a new player. They were really friendly. I hope they had a great time, and I hope they come back. But they got there, and me and you had arranged to just play Flesh and Blood before, and we're new to the game, so we were just deep in the fucking tank, focusing on that. And I think they just sat down next to a couple of players that maybe said less than 2 words to them. Despite them coming up and introing, like, I've never played Magic before, and then it was just like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's fine. I don't think it's the community's job to bring those people in. I think it's more on the game store that should have to facilitate like onboarding new players. But I do think that's the problem. Going back to that community having to do the step up to intro those new players. I think Commander, because of the sheer volume of players that play and it being a 4-player game, I think the people that go are more ready to be that onboarder. Whereas I think the modern community maybe isn't as ready, which I think they can be. And it was just like sod's luck, sod's law of who's there. It was like that poor, I know I'll meme on it, and it wasn't anything to do with James, but there was that bloke that showed up and played against James and just like lost game 1 and literally went home. Because James was playing like some aggressive control Tron strategy, and they were playing like a suboptimal Lord of the Rings food deck or something.
I would say though that it's partly that's the nature of competitive games, though, right? Like, it's not exclusive to card games, even, right? I've been to some badminton clubs, in our, experimentation into badminton for the last year and a half, and just been like cold-shouldered because I'm rubbish.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, there's a court down there for you with the old boys. You can whack it around really slowly with them, but you got a while before you're up here.
Yeah, but I think that's the problem with F&M is as long as I've been to Athena, F&M has been pretty damn spiky and competitive. I don't think there's ever been a time where everyone's just like fucking around. Most of the time, it's like 80+% tier 1 and up decks, and people that have played Magic for a while. So I think the problem is the placement, and I've been banging this drum for over a year. The placement is advertising those events in the right way and explaining what they are. Because at the end of the day, and I might be shooting myself in the foot here because I do like to go to F&M, I personally think at RLGS they should maybe just stop F&M, because I think the push is that it should be casual and onboardy for new players, but it isn't. So if you're not willing to, follow what the community are doing and push it as that, but you're also not pushing it heavily the other way and telling the comp players like, hey, can you fucking tone your decks down, or play on a Wednesday or whatever it might be, maybe it's just best not to run it, because you're probably scaring new players away rather than onboarding new players that do show up.
I've always wondered why they haven't moved standard to Friday yet, because Wednesdays just feels like, especially, even having it as an RCQ season format somewhere on the, the scheduling where it's like, okay, this is feeding into RCQs, even if we don't run them. This is a place for players to come and play that format that is relevant to them at this time. But they tried a lot of things and then have landed on just not doing anything now.
I think that this is it, though. For me, F&M Friday Night Magic should be the onboard.
Yeah.
That should always be an onboard something, be it fucking pauper.
Well, they used to have early F&M, which was for...
But again, it's player based. There just isn't enough players.
And there was a regular turnout of school children who would come and try out Magic, and it was very obvious, right? There was only one or two. Gideon, right, used to play early F&M, and then was like, "Oh, I'm going to stay for the later one," knowing that the later one was rough. Right?
Yeah.
You're going to be tested at this later one. But they don't have anything now, and I guess I'd say this is partly Hasbro's fault as well, right, or Wizards' fault, because there is no route to competitive Magic anymore. It's you are either playing comp Magic or you're playing casual Magic, and there's no if you're playing casual, this is how you get into competitive Magic, or this is what a competitive deck even has in it. These are the sets that it has in it. That new player who came recently to F&M was playing a standard deck and maybe wasn't even aware. They spoke about how they were aware they were coming into a fucking bloodbath. Yeah. So I think they will come back, because that was they knew Modern was a problem. And they were happy to accept that. And I think we offered to lend decks as well, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I guess that, why? So what is the draw for you? I guess. I guess this is the thing. I know Flesh and Blood is my topic at the moment, but it makes me laugh because I've seen 10 threads on Reddits and forums over the last week of people asking how do I get into Flesh and Blood in a more casual environment? And the replies are just you don't. This is a competitive game, and I think that's fine. And whereas Pokemon, I think, is more the casual side, and you have to go really high up to get to the comp. But whereas Magic is in this weird spot of how do you onboard players outside of Commander to draw them into comp?
But even then, the Flesh and Blood has a new player guide.
Yeah,
the website's much more accessible. There is a very clear structure on how to progress in the game, right? The language is better, right? Road to Nationals. There is a national that's kind of fallen away for Magic in general. Like the UK used to host GPs, right? And now they just at some point took UK off the map.
They've come back. It's come back now. Finally, like we're getting one this year.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it like affects things, right?
Yeah, you'd hope so.
So what's? I mean, aside from
just
that,
to touch on what you guys have been talking about. I mean, I'd start by saying, if you look at how we ended up where we are now, in terms of now being hard modern grinders, that's our format. We want it spiky as possible. That's where we're at. We started off as casual commander guys.
Sure.
Picked up precons, and that lasted for nearly 2 years, progressively getting more and more spiky to the point where it was CDH.
I'd say it got to CDH within a year. I think it was pretty quick.
Maybe. But I do, that is happening. But it's happening on the standard night, which is Wednesday night. So the last time I went to standard, which was about a month ago, there was about 10 to 15, well, no, 10 is exact. I'd say, about 10 people that were transitioning from their commander to a 1v1 format.
Yeah.
They rocked up, they were playing, casualish decks, but they were learning, they were getting to grips with 1v1 because it's a different game almost. And, a majority of them were coming and had been going for, several months. So I think the transition is starting to happen, at least in our area for some people. But to actually jump up to modern, that's a big step, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that will necessarily happen. Wizards could do a lot more to help that transition and get people into 1v1. Releasing precons for these formats would just be so much better than...
Or equally supporting modern less. I know we don't want that as fans of modern, but I will maintain that I think having the 3 RCQ seasons as standard is probably pretty damn good.
Well, for that, right? So I think they've recognised that. So, we've now got, I think every year we'll get 1 modern season and the rest will be a mixture of standard and pioneer, I'd imagine.
I think they'll drop pioneer.
Well, if they do, they do. Yeah. But, I like pioneer at the minute, just going to throw it out there. But, and now we're getting these GP events, right, where it is going to be a mixture of the spikes that want to go play a big event, that really want to try and win it. And then you get these casual guys that can just pay to play. And that's what we saw in Utrecht, right? You've got the mixture of casualer players. And, if the next GP is standard, it will be probably even bigger. And we're now getting one in the UK, which is, when was the last time we had that, right?
I think it's 2 years.
Yeah, I think the tides are slowly turning in getting new players into 1v1 competitive format, which is great. But in terms of actually what excites me about Magic, for me, it is just scratching the competitive itch. I want to be trying to best myself, best other players over a strategy game. Does it have to be Magic? Question marks on that, but that's what I'm most invested in, so that's why it's there. In terms of the uniqueness that it offers from other card games, every card game has their own little quirk, right? Their own thing that separates it from the pack. And Magic, I think, probably has the biggest in the sense of the way it manages resources in terms of mana. And it has its pros and cons, but for me, that's what I really like. That's the actual game facet that excites me still.
I mean, I guess that's more of a better way to put it, is not necessarily the social side is what keeps me coming back, but it is the hope that it does feel like things will maybe get better. But then, I think that's the thing, you look on the negative side of it, I look at how long I've played and how long things haven't got better for a period, but it does make you lose a bit of faith.
The point you started at was the lowest though, right?
Yeah.
It's straight after COVID, everything had been pushed to be online. They realised the demand isn't necessarily there for that, and people want to play paper.
Yeah.
And it's been slowly creeping back up and back up. They obviously changed how the whole comp format works in terms of RCQs and ditched the whole GP side of it, where you couldn't just pay and maybe end up on the Pro Tour. That went, you then had to dedicate a weekend to try and qualify first. Then you have to go and do your big event and hope you do well there. So the step is probably harder because you can't just have that one-off hot streak when you went and paid and played this big tournament. But that is now back, right? So
I do think one thing they need to really look at is better promo support for these big events, because like obviously even at low level the RCQ promos have been fucking abysmal lately, and you look at Lorcana and you look at Fab, like most of the appeal and how they compensate these kind of bad prize pools is they give away really rare collectible cards. Like I think Lorcana was giving away like full sets of like every enchanted and stuff like that, so like, you know, second market value.
I mean, I completely agree, to be clear, but the only argument I can see them ever having is that these promos were planned 2 years ago and at the time those cards were really relevant, and but you know, it's a terrible excuse really, but trying to play devil's advocate. But yeah, there should be good promos to be won because it's at no extra cost to Wizards, right?
Yeah, especially with stuff like promos, that should be a bit more dynamic. I understand sets they plan like ahead because they have to think of a lot of things, but
I mean, I thought it might have been changing when they had the Urza Saga promo.
Store Champs promo.
That was hot as hell, right?
Yeah.
And then they've just been abysmal again. So why did we suddenly get this incredible...
Well, I mean, like, even as much as they weren't, like, as hot, like, the Omnath was hot.
Yeah.
There was, like, the Dark Confidant, the Darthy Voidwalker. There's been a few, but then you also get, like...
Preacher Eliscism.
Yeah, or some shit Eldrazi card.
Yeah.
You know, like, it is a bit... I don't know. And to be fair, I will say, you know, putting a card like Darthy Voidwalker as text list or...
Well, that was the big problem with Urza Saga, right?
They're not the best card choices to.
But there are no good cards. Every card has 1,000 words on it now, right?
Because of power creep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like something like Guide of Souls will be easier. Like there are easier cards that don't have quite as much card text to them.
Yeah.
But
how much energy do you have to pay again for that?
Yeah, sure.
I think it's the kind of landscape that I would hope for is one where there is no. Like print straight to modern format set. I think that for me is an issue. Like it's essentially there are 3 different kinds of Magic, right? There's the modern, which is almost separate now. I don't get standard cards that really touch modern. There's like 1 or 2 per standard set, which just it used to be that a standard set would have plenty of modern playable cards. Now they're like, we're just going to print some absolute bomb shit over here in the Modern Horizons area, and Standard can have its own lane, and then Commander's got its own lane. Like, scrap the modern stuff. If it's not flying off the shelves and we're not playing it and you're not supporting it, then I'd rather not be playing it, and I'd rather be part of the group of Standard players where there's, 40-odd, 50-odd people who are buzzing about it in a county, and then there is a clear road to wherever we're going. Are we RCQing into this RC, into this Pro Tour? What does that look like? Is it localized? Is there more opportunities to do that? And then that's where I'm excited about Magic again. But at the moment, it's a fractured game. With
I think though a lot of
bits going on over here, bits going on over there.
But I agree it's a fractured game. But I do think a lot of the negative points we discuss behind the scenes and my own feelings are probably self-inflicted, in that I think my downturn on Magic has very much been in line with the downward trajectory of the Friday Night Magic community in Norwich, and I think it is kind of self-inflicted. Like, I know, like I was talking to someone about it the other day, and I was kind of like, yeah, it does feel kind of bad, because if as a team we just decide we're going to test, Modern doesn't fire because there aren't enough players, right? So I do feel that's kind of like a feels bad kind of, we're partially responsible as well. But then it goes back to that whole, like, how much is it on the community to keep these things going?
But the price of product's also a point that I could go into, right? The price of product is so high in comparison to some other card games, and the price to get involved, not in a like, Modern's too expensive kind of way, but like people aren't buying and cracking product like they are Lorcana or Pokemon or Fab. They're just not.
Pokemon, I will say, is the outlier. I do not understand why people buy product for that game. Like, like I was having a conversation with a store owner.
It doesn't hold value, right?
Yeah, like literally, like the cards are pennies, and there's no fucking sane reason to ever open product.
There's also the argument
people
that,
do.
Like, let's be clear, the prices shouldn't be the prices. I'm not trying to justify that. But the other card games are going to be naturally cheaper because they're in their infancy. You know, when you're comparing it to Flesh and Blood, it's still growing. It still needs its new audience.
I think the cheapest boxes are Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think
they
that's probably
yeah.
within two. Like, when did that get started? 96, 97 maybe?
If we're looking at raw player base based on like region, let's say NA, APAC, Europe, I think some of these games are really on their way to trouncing Magic numbers, right? In terms of player base.
Outside of Commander. Outside. But I think the only untouchable game is Pokemon. I don't think anything will ever get to Pokemon levels. I think it's impossible.
I think, again, that's the fractured nature of the game, though, right? You say, accept Commander, but Commander's a different product. You know, Commander product's adjacent to a standard box now. There's very little that a Commander player wants from a standard set, which is what's frustrating, right? Is that they don't feed into each other the way that they used to.
I just never understand. Sorry to harp on about Pokemon, but I just never understand Pokemon because I don't know how it's got the backing that it's got from the people that back it. So, like, that back when I used to resell shoes, one of the biggest resellers in the UK was a dude called Vivian Frank, and still might be. Like, it was a huge reseller. And now every fucking Pokemon video I see at a convention, he's trading Pokemon cards. And, like, all the Pokemon vendors are, like, head to toe in fucking Dior and, like, going sneaker shopping and all this stuff. And you're just like, why has this crossover happened? Like, how has this happened? Why did the Sidemen, like, get involved with Pokemon for that time? And why was Jake Paul cracking fucking base set?
Because it's nostalgia, right?
Yeah, it's nostalgia, but, like, it's
more accessible to everyone. Like, Magic never had an anime to follow, right?
But why did Cassius and Post Malone, why did they not go viral for doing the stupid? Like, why? I guess it's.
Well, they did go viral.
Yeah, but not quite as. I guess the issue, and I don't want to shit on them because I think the guy's hilarious. I know he's controversial, but I guess from a teenager perspective, watching these videos, watching influencers like Jake Paul, Logan Paul, KSI open product is probably different to watching Rudy and, like, the fucking Fab guys, like, opening product, because you're talking similar levels of, like, product being opened and these, like, like, as much as I love, is it open boosters? Love the dude. Content's hilarious.
With his little.
If I was a 13-year-old and I saw someone putting on surgical gloves and getting out a scalpel to open some cling film on a pack, I'd probably be like,
He also doesn't get very excited because he doesn't want to damage the card, so it's like a contained excitement.
Yeah, yeah.
People just haven't heard of Magic either, to be honest. Like, my mum would be able to name Pikachu and Charizard.
Yeah.
But
Magic just never.
No one, unless you're Ian, knows what Black Lotus is.
Yeah. Funnily enough, my dad actually texted me like 2 months ago, being like, have you checked your collection for any of this card called Black Lotus? Like, I saw an auction program and I was like, right.
I think it's partly, though, that it's who it's marketed to, right? Like, Disney and Pokemon are marketed to children, and that's just where you got to make the most money, is if you sell children's stuff, right? Like, you get much more money that way because there's just more of them, right? And they all it's all about on trend, whereas, like, a game like Fab, which is just an adult game, like, there's no accessibility for anyone under the age of 16. Like, you just, that's a different market entirely. And they're kind of doing different things, right? Like, Pokemon's gameplay isn't particularly engaging.
That is how Flesh and Blood is, that's the market it is, because they saw the gap, right? They're like, no, COVID's just happened. No one's got a competitive card game at the moment. No one's supporting that. We'll move straight into that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's now reaching levels of Magic in terms of these competitive events, if not exceeding them, because that's its whole audience.
I do think it is a. I think this is actually the real, fork in the road kind of decision that I kind of feel I face is I love the gameplay of Magic and I will always love Magic, but it feels like the direction that the company are taking Magic is not the direction I would like my card game to go.
It depends on what aspect of that you're talking about, because if you're talking about in terms of supporting comp, a year ago I'd agreed. A year later, there's been enough steps where I'm encouraged that it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, maybe it is just a patience thing.
Yeah.
I think Magic's also lost a bit of its identity in that, there was a period of time where it's like, this is the plane that we're on, and this is the thing. And with the introduction of Universes Beyond, it's like, Pokemon's got its childlike cartoon look. Disney Lorcana's got its huge Walt Disney IP behind it. Flesh and Blood's got the adult, like, warrior warfare thing going on. Magic used to be the high fantasy demons, dragons kind of game, and now it's not. It's not the high fantasy game it was. Now it's got mice and this thing, and which is great, and I love that, but it has lost a bit of its.
I don't mind
is the lane that I'm in.
I didn't mind Bloomburrow, like the mice theme. I thought that was still fantasy enough. Like for me, it is, and I know I always take the piss out of Magic Boomers, but like Final Fantasy being a standard set, Spider-Man's a standard set as well, right?
Will be, yeah.
Yeah, like I think that is for me the step of it's becoming too frequent. I used to like Universes Beyond, but now
I do
it's
agree,
like too
and
much.
When you think about it objectively, like we are now, it's irritating, right, and it's frustrating. But when you actually start playing, you soon realise you don't care.
No, I don't care.
I couldn't tell you what half the cards, the artwork looks like. Couldn't tell you whether they're Magic, Universes Beyond, nothing.
No, but I think we're a type of player,
about what it does.
though, right? We're a type of player who enjoys
but then
strategy of it, and I still enjoy like Assassin's Creed and all those cards that kind of still do things that are kind of Magic-esque, like ninjutsu and whatever. But there are players who will not engage with Magic because it doesn't have an identity. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I've heard plenty of them say that, but I've not actually seen any of them walk away yet.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
was going to say similar. Like, I think it probably is drawing in more players than it's putting off.
Yeah,
maybe.
But it's how we get.
I'll see how Spider-Man standard is when we play it in a few months, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one. But yeah, it's been some good discussion points, and I think we're coming to a close, and it's time to go home and do whatever we do on a Monday night. Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you guys for joining me. I imagine, although this was kind of Ed's episode to come up with the topics for, I imagine Ed will probably be on the next team one, not to put pressure on him, just because
I'm all that's left, mate. The rest are gone.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's just going to be every week. Ed's going to be picking topics to.
No, I'm picking the next. If it's just me, you, and Ed, I'm picking the next topic.
I can't actually remember who's picking the next topic.
I mean, let's face it, the topic didn't really matter today, did it? We barely stayed on topic. But
that is very true. I think that's always the way, though.
You just want to generate discussion.
There was a big question, and then we kind of devolved into our own personal opinion.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. That's what Magic players do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the next one, I might be wrong, but I think the next one's going to be Will. So, get ready for some boomer Magic discussion, because he's definitely an older player that doesn't like Universes Beyond.
He's going to tell us all about.
But he's still here.
He is still here.
Summer Bloom and Splinter Twin.
And like Will being still here, we're thankful you're still here at the end of the episode. Thank you very much for watching, listening, and we will see you on the next one.
See ya.
Peace.